Welcome back. It's Tuesday, August 22nd, and we're continuing our series predicting every NFL team's record game by game. And today we have the AFC and NFC East, two very competitive divisions, two divisions that may have two or three playoff teams respectively, so should be tons of fun. But if you like sports podcasts, I'm telling you, this is the channel for you. I'm dropping 2 sports podcasts a week, as well as 2 fantasy football videos a week. We have some good prep videos coming up for your drafts here this week, so subscribe for that. But if you enjoyed at any point, all we ask for is that you support us down below. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, share the podcast, all that good stuff. But without further ado, this is Owen. This is the Anomaly Podcast. We're going to start here in Miami. All right, starting here in Miami. And this is a team that last year started off the season hot. New head coach, new receiver in Tyreek Hill. This offense got out to a fiery start, and they look like one of the most dominant teams in the NFL. But as we know, due to some injuries and one key injury to their quarterback, kind of derailed their season. They still made the playoffs, but fell short there in the first round to the division foe in the Buffalo Bills. But now they're back this season. Their quarterback's bulked up. He's ready to go, at least we believe, as far as his medicals. As on the left side of your screen, you see the first 9 weeks of the year starts off with a win, going on the road to Los Angeles to take down the Chargers in week 1. We know the Chargers, their fans don't travel well ever since they left San Diego. Miami goes on the road week 1 to get back on track from where they left off in the regular season, at least last season. But then in week 2, they go to New England. I believe it's a Thursday night game in Foxborough. And Bill Belichick's going to have his way. Bill Belichick is going to win this one, as we'll see in a little bit. It's kind of one of their few wins this year. But Miami 1-1 after 2 weeks. They have to get back on track. And I think they do that in a very big way. And this is where they start to separate themselves from mediocrity. As week 3, home against Denver, there's a lot of questions with Russell Wilson, with Sean Payton. We know there's going to be an adjustment period with those two, no matter how comfortable they may say they are. New coaches and quarterbacks need that adjustment period. Week 3, Miami gets the win. Week 4, at Buffalo. Here's a big one. I don't believe it's a primetime game, but big divisional game here. Miami's going to be looking to take down Buffalo, as they had their number last year in the regular season. But of course, in the playoffs, Buffalo had the upper hand. Miami's going to take this one on the road in Buffalo. Huge win for the Dolphins. They're going to follow that up with 2 home wins against the Giants. Very formidable team. We'll talk about them here in a little bit. And then the number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young and this young Panthers team. The Dolphins are now off to a 5-1 start, 6 weeks into the year. Tua looks amazing, back to full strength, and this offense looks ready to go. This year, I think a big part that people are overlooking is that a guy like Jalen Waddle still has a lot of potential to be maybe the best receiver on this team, and that's a hot take with a guy, of course, in Tyreek Hill over there. No disrespect, but 5-1 start. They look amazing on top of the AFC. Then they have a very big game. They go into Philly to take on the reigning NFC East champs and the reigning NFC champions, I should say, in the Philadelphia Eagles. They lose this one in Week 7 in Philly to the reigning NFC East champions, a team that should be right back where they were last year. Week 8, they get their revenge on New England and Bill Belichick. They win that game. At that point, New England, there's going to be a lot of questions, at least in my predictions, on is it Mac Jones? Is he their guy going forward? Is it Bailey Zapp? Is Bill Belichick even the right guy to lead this team going into the future? As since Brady's left, he's had only 1 playoff appearance, and he's kind of been mediocre, I guess is a way to put it. So there's going to be a lot of questions at this point in the season for New England. Miami is going to get their revenge. Week 9 at Kansas City in primetime. It kind of sucks, whoever made the schedule for Miami, as you face the 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl last year, both on the road in a span of 3 weeks in primetime games. I think they are also going to lose to Kansas City here in Week 9 in Arrowhead going into the second half of this season. So at the midseason mark, Miami looks like a very good team. We can see Tua's back and he's better than ever. And this team is 6-3, so you can't really complain with how you're doing at this point in the season. But before we get into the second half of the Dolphins' schedule, Shout out to today's sponsor, Life by Laura. This is a company that reached out to me just a couple weeks back, and there's been a mutual interest ever since, and I'm definitely going to go back to her company as she makes custom t-shirts, tumblers, crafts, and more. You can go on her pages, either on Facebook at Life by Laura or on Instagram, Life by Laura 2023, to see her past projects or even discuss with her future projects. She sent me out a custom tumbler just a few weeks back, and I've been using it ever since here, and I've been using it on these shows. As on these podcasts, I do a lot of talking. I need a drink with me, so whether if it's a coffee, a hot coffee in the morning, or of course, an energy drink, a cold one, to get me through a show, this custom tumbler has been able to insulate it enough to keep it either hot or cold for long stretches of time. High quality cup. And again, check them out. Help Laura get to 150 followers for helping out or supporting the podcast. But again, you wouldn't be disappointed. Go check out her page. It's at least worth 5 minutes of your time. But shout out to Life by Laura, first sponsor on the channel. Couldn't be more grateful for her reaching out to us and, of course, giving me this custom tumbler. But moving over to the second half of this Dolphins schedule, of course, at the bye week, they are 6-3, at week 10. And after the bye week, after losing to Philadelphia and Kansas City in 2 out of 3 weeks, they need a big win. And not that Las Vegas is a competent team, but I think Miami gets back on the right track at home to take down the Las Vegas Raiders. But then they go to New York to take on the Jets in a primetime game. And I think they lose that one, right? So this is a team that wanted to get back on track. They picked up a win against Las Vegas, but then they lost to another good team. So can this team beat competent teams? We saw that they could beat the Chargers and Buffalo early on, but since then, they've lost to 3 playoff teams, and it hasn't looked like they can win that big game ever since that point. But then, week 13, they go to Washington, and I think they win that one, whether if it's Jacoby Brissett or whether if it's Sam Howell. I think Miami will be able to take care of business, as I'll talk about it here in a second. But I'm a big fan of Miami's defense, and that might be the most underrated part of this team this year. Week 14 in primetime against the Titans, that's a win. Week 15, they get their revenge, of course, home against the New York Jets. They win that one. But then week 16, here's a very big game for me. And I think this week 16 game against Dallas will determine if this team is a 2 seed, a 3 seed, or maybe they could be in the running for the number 1 seed after this week 16 game. But I think they're going to fall short. Even though they're home, I think Dallas is a very formidable team. Dallas, of course, is a very good regular season team, and we'll talk about that later. But Miami is going to lose that one, very pivotal game. And now these last 2 games are super pivotal to see, 1, who can make the playoffs, but 2, who can win this AFC East division. And Miami is now in a tougher spot than they were before that week. Week 17, they go to Baltimore, and very controversial, but last year they beat Baltimore. TUA had 600 passing yards and 5 touchdowns in week 1. He dominated them. And I think if this year he's going to come back better than ever, even though they're on the road, I'm going to have Miami going into Baltimore and winning this game. So they get back on track after that Dallas loss, and they close off the year with a big win against Buffalo, sweeping Buffalo. I believe this is a team that can finish 12-5, maybe on top of the AFC East. But this season all depends on the health of Tua Tagovailoa. But if he is healthy for this Miami club, I like this team a lot this season. And despite them being 1-4 in primetime games, I do believe they can go 4-2 in this division, sweeping Buffalo, where they've always had their number. And I believe they might win this division. They're going to be in a really good spot to do so. I don't want to spoil it here in a sec. But we know the talent that this team has offensively, with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, with Tua. And all of that is paired with an offensive guru of a mind and a head coach in Mike McDaniel. There's going to be more continuity this year in a second-year head coach. So this offense might even get better than it was last year, as they made the playoffs last year and almost beat the Buffalo Bills in the first round with Skylar Thompson at quarterback. They've added to this defense last year at the midseason mark. They traded for an all-pro level edge in Bradley Chubb, and he's going to command the front there with a guy like Jalen Phillips, who is only rising up here in the NFL, as those 2 guys are going to command the front 7. But then on the back end, which was maybe their weakness last year, they went out there and they traded for maybe the best cornerback in the game. They traded pennies on a dollar for Jalen Ramsey, again, maybe the best cornerback in the NFL. So that is 2 great pieces. Jalen Ramsey is going to command the back of the secondary of this defense, Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips can command the front end of this defense. And not to mention, they brought in Vic Fangio to run this defense as the new defensive coordinator, who, let's not forget, his scheme took over the league last year, took the league by storm last year as the infamous Fangio 6 defense. It's now in Miami, and it took over the league last year by the midseason mark. I think there was a statistic that 50% of teams switched over to this Vic Fangio scheme, and now he's bringing that to a much more talented defense here in Miami. So they have the new defensive coordinator. They have the new star cornerback. They have continuity with the offense, the defense. They have it all to win at a very high level this year. They just need Tua to be healthy. And I think if he can do that, I think they might win this division. Moving over to the Buffalo Bills, of course, last year's division winner. They might have won it 2 years in a row now at this point. Maybe even 3, now that I think about it. Regardless, they open up the year, I believe, a Monday night or a Sunday night game against the New York Jets in New York. The new-look Jets versus the proven Buffalo Bills. 2 teams that have Super Bowl aspirations this year. Buffalo goes on the road, and I'm going to say Aaron Rodgers has a little bit of a quote-unquote beginner luck with his new team, and they're going to pull out that one against the Bills in Week 1. So Buffalo loses a close one in Week 1. But then they bounce back. They beat Las Vegas at home. Then they go to Washington, beat Washington. No shockers there. Week 4, at home. Of course, I mentioned, I think Miami has their number this year. They lose that one at home. So 2-2 throughout the first 4 weeks. You're looking for a big win. But then they go overseas. They go overseas to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they win that one. So big game. We know Jacksonville has been very successful in London over these last couple years, but Buffalo gets their number here in Week 5. Week 6 against Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll used to be a coach on this Buffalo Bills offense, so it's a little bit of a revenge game, quote unquote, or just kind of like a homecoming for Brian Daboll to take on the Buffalo Bills. But I am going to give the edge to the New York Giants. Why, you ask me? I have no clue. It's just weird things happen in the NFL, and this is just going to be an interesting storyline here early in the year where Brian Daboll, he might have an extra edge or extra motivation this week than ever to get a win over his old team. So that's going to be an interesting storyline there. I think the Giants get a huge win in Week 6. Week 7 and 8 at New England, home against Tampa. 2 easy wins for Buffalo. Buffalo gets back on the right track, but they haven't really had that big win streak or even that big win yet against a competent team. I guess Jacksonville is a way to put it. I love Jacksonville this year, so I take that back. But they need to get on that win streak to really win this division, and I think they continue it. Week 9 at Cincy, rematch of last year's playoffs, and of course, the infamous Damar Hamlin game. But the Buffalo Bills win that game against the Cincinnati Bengals. If you guys have missed the first episode of this series, I think Cincinnati's going to win the Super Bowl this year. They are my Super Bowl favorites. I've said it since the end of last year. But Buffalo is going to get a big regular season win against the Cincinnati Bengals there in Week 9. Week 10, they host the Denver Broncos in a primetime game. They win that one. Week 11, they get the revenge on the Jets. They win that one as well. But then Week 12, they're on a 5-game win streak. They go into Philadelphia to take on the reigning, defending NFC champions in the Philadelphia Eagles. I think they lose that one. I think pretty handily too, as Buffalo's a really good team. There's just levels to this. There's levels to the Buffaloes of the world, to the Kansas Cities and the Philadelphias of the world. And Buffalo is going to lose pretty handily there to the Philadelphia Eagles. Week 14, after their bye week, they go to Kansas City. So I don't know why these schedule makers put Philadelphia and KC together in a lot of team schedules, but they did that. And before their bye week, Buffalo has to play Philly in Philly. And then they go into their bye. They have a week to rest. But then they don't really have an easy game to ease back into it because they go right to Arrowhead to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. In short, I think they lose that one to the Chiefs. Buffalo loses 2 big games there to the 2 Super Bowl teams from last year. Week 15, they win against Dallas. Week 16, primetime game against the Los Angeles Chargers. A very big game for the Buffalo Bills. But I think they lose this one. I think this is where Justin Herbert just outplays Josh Allen. And they're in Los Angeles. And I know, again, Chargers fans don't travel well. They don't really have that many fans to start with. But they have a very talented team. And the Chargers get that one. But then Buffalo wins against New England. Week 18, big game against the Miami Dolphins. Possibly. Yeah, well, I'll say this. At this point in the season, due to my predictions, the Bills would have nothing to play for. They would be playing for a playoff spot, but they would have no chance at the division. Depending on how everything else goes, I think at this point they're locked into a playoff spot. They have nothing to play for. They sit their starters. They lose to the Miami Dolphins in Week 18, as that will be a very boring matchup of just backups. But it's a big year in Buffalo, as if they don't get it done this year, I expect some big moves to be made in Buffalo as, do they panic? Do they get rid of Sean McDermott, even though he's been one of the best coaches in the league in his time in Buffalo? Do they overspend on a trade? Maybe they go out there and trade for a Cooper Kupp from the Rams or trade for a Terry McLaurin from the Commanders? Those are just a couple options I'm throwing out there, as we don't know the future of Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs has started to voice his frustrations as he doesn't really view the Bills as contenders anymore, which is kind of crazy that your star receiver is saying that. But it's a big year in Buffalo. They have a lot of questions to figure out. How much are they going to panic if this doesn't turn out the year that they want it to? Regardless, I think they're an even 3-3 in their record, or in their division, a 4-3 record in prime time. They have no doubt maybe the toughest division or toughest end to the season. I'll say that as, again, someone has a death wish, these schedule makers do, for the Buffalo Bills in the last 6 games. As if you look at their last 6 games, they go against the New York Jets, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Dallas Cowboys, the Chargers, and the New England Patriots. I'm not counting that Week 18 game because I don't believe the starters will be playing. But in those 6 weeks, that is a crazy 6 weeks to end the year for the Buffalo Bills. These schedule makers are definitely not Buffalo fans. Moving over to the New England Patriots, we'll kind of fly through this one, as Bill Belichick might be the greatest coach of all time, but there's only so much you can do with the talent at your disposal. Week 1, home against Philly, doesn't matter, they lose that one. Week 2, big win for Mac Jones and his Patriots team, as there's going to be an adjustment period. I know Bill O'Brien used to be the offensive coordinator for this Patriots team for a couple years there in the early 2010s, but he's now back. This is his first year back after being with Alabama. He is going to need an adjustment period there with Mac Jones, as he was working with Tom Brady before when he was here the first time. Now he's with Mac Jones. Big difference there in quarterback. But I do think Week 2 they could put it together at home in Foxborough, primetime game, win that one against the Miami Dolphins. Weeks 3 and 4, they go to New York to take on the Jets, and Week 4, they go to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. I'm going to have 2 losses there for New England, as I wouldn't doubt New England winning one of those games because you can never count out Bill Belichick, but too much talent on the Jets and the Cowboys teams to give the edge to the coaching staff. Weeks 5 and 6, I do have them winning both games. They take care of New Orleans at home. New Orleans, I have struggling early on, as you saw in last Thursday's video. One of those losses comes to the New England Patriots. Week 6, it is Josh McDaniels versus Bill Belichick. The mentees to Bill Belichick's mentor, they don't really fare well against Bill Belichick, the mentees. So I think that nothing changes here. Las Vegas, there's a lot of questions about them. I'm not the biggest fan of them this year, as you'll see in Thursday's video. I think they lose this one to the New England Patriots. Josh McDaniels, again, can't get over his mentor. Week 7 and 8 versus Buffalo and Miami. 2 losses there for New England. Week 9, they're home against the Washington Commanders. They win that one against Sam Howell, as young quarterbacks struggle against Bill Belichick, as Bill Belichick, he lives to play those young quarterbacks, and he's going to get a chance here in Week 9 against Sam Howell, or maybe Jacoby Brissett, but either or. Jacoby Brissett played in New England for years, so if there's anyone that knows what he likes, what he doesn't like, I think the person that knows the best is his old coach in Bill Belichick. So if it's the young quarterback or Jacoby Brissett, they don't have a chance here against New England, as they're winning a lot of their home games here in the first half of the season. But on the road, they're struggling, aside from the Las Vegas game. But Week 10, Bill Belichick lives to play these young quarterbacks. They're going to be home against Anthony Richardson in Week 10. As you saw in last week's video, if you watched it, I'm not the biggest believer in the Colts this year. I think that it's more of a year of a development than in the win column. And New England's going to win that one. So Week 11 comes by. It's their bye week. They're 5-5. They're even 500. They're in a stacked division. So given where they're at, 5-5, you're in a pretty good spot to maybe make a playoff push. But then if you're looking at the screen, it is anything but that. As weeks 12 through 18, I have the Patriots losing each and every game to close out the year, putting themselves in a position to, one, maybe replace Mac Jones, or is Bailey Zapp the guy? I think after week 12, or we'll say 13. So I'll say it this way. So from weeks 12 through 18, I have them losing to the Giants, the Chargers, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Denver, at Buffalo, and the New York Jets to close out the year. So this is a team that, is going to have those questions at quarterback come week 13 and 14. Maybe they throw Bailey Zapp in there in week 14 at Pittsburgh to maybe see what they have in the backup. Or maybe Bailey Zapp is the guy for them. I have the Patriots finishing at 5-12. Very underwhelming season. And unfortunately, this may be Bill Belichick's last year head coaching, or at least coaching the New England Patriots. Might be his retirement year is a way to put it, at least if they play this way. I'll say it that way. But it does feel disrespectful to have the GOAT of the head coaching spot end his career with a season like this. But given their schedule, given their division, not a lot is in their favor, especially if you add on the quarterback questions with Bailey Zapp or Mac Jones and how bad their offense has been as of late. There's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of things going against New England this year. So, of course, it's just not in their favor. It's just not in their cards, is a way to put it, for 2023. But as always, New England, they're going to be a very competent, good home team, well-coached team. They're just not going to find a lot of success in the win department this season. Moving over to the last AFC East team, it is the new-look New York Jets, no pun intended. But they're going to start off the year hot. As I mentioned, they're going to beat Buffalo at home in primetime to kick off the year. Aaron Rodgers has a little bit of beginner luck. But then their ego gets in the way. They're riding a high. Maybe they get a two-score win against Buffalo week 1. Then they go to Dallas. Dallas is a good, very competent, and a regular season team, And I think the Jets will lose that one to the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. That game will be highlighted because Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers, of course, used to be a pairing there in Green Bay. I think Mike McCarthy might get the advantage there in the Dallas's home game in week 2. Week 3, I think they pick up a win at home against the New England Patriots. Week 4 is a very big game, primetime game, home against the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to see what this Jets team is made of. I think Kansas City gets the edge. Kansas City is just too good. They have the best player on the planet in Patrick Mahomes. They win that one on the road in New York. But then in week 5, another matchup that's going to be highlighted. And you're like, why? It's the Jets going to Denver to take on a Denver team that struggled last year. It's going to be for one reason and one reason only. Nathaniel Hackett. He used to be the head coach of the of the Denver Broncos last year. And now he is the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. Of course, the Nathaniel Hackett era in Denver was pitiful, to say the least. And now he is back with Aaron Rodgers, back as the offensive coordinator for Aaron Rodgers. So this game is going to be highlighted for the simple fact that Nathaniel Hackett is going to want to get his revenge on the Denver Broncos franchise and organization, especially with how he's been talked about since his departure. I think they go into Mile High, they win that one, and in stunning fashion, as maybe it comes down to an overtime game. Regardless, the Jets get the upper hand. Week 6, they go to Philadelphia. They host Philadelphia. Doesn't matter if they're on the road in Germany and London. The Jets are not ready for the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia is going to get that win. As going into their bye week, week 7, this New York Jets team is an even 3-3 record. You can't really complain as, again, new coaches and elite quarterbacks need that year to mesh. They need that year of continuity to build that, at least for the future. And teams usually with new quarterbacks struggle early on. But this team, even 3-3, after losing to 3 playoff contenders in Dallas, Kansas City, and Philly, you can't really be mad if you're a New York Jets fan. But then week 8, you have the Battle of New York against the Giants. You win that game against the Giants. I was close to giving that game to the Giants for the simple fact that Brian Daboll is a very good coach. However, I gave the edge to the veteran Jets. Moving over to the Chargers, at home, week 9, primetime game. I do have the Chargers getting the upper hand. So at the midseason mark, I have this team at 4-4. Again, given who they've lost to, you can't really be mad as they haven't won that big game yet, aside from the Week 1 stunner in Buffalo. But they haven't won that big game, against Dallas, Kansas City, Philly, or the Chargers. They need that big win. Of course, they're not going to get it here. Week 10, they are at Las Vegas. Las Vegas at this point is struggling. The Jets get an easy win here. Week 11, rematch against Buffalo. I did give the advantage to Buffalo, so a split there between the two teams, as those teams will be very competitive this year for the second and third spots in the AFC East, at least in my opinion. Week 12, 13 and 14. Home against Miami, Atlanta, and Houston. This is where Aaron Rodgers starts to catch his stride. Coincidentally, this is where Jordan Love starts to catch his stride there as a starter in Green Bay. So, little interesting storyline there. But I think 3 straight wins for the New York Jets. Really good spot to make the playoffs. And then Week 15. This is going to be the game of the year for the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins. The Jets going to Miami, and they're going to be basically playing for the division in Week 15. And it might sound crazy, but tiebreakers are also a crazy thing. The New York Jets are going to lose that one in Miami. I think that Tua has a big game against this great Jets defense, and the Jets just fall short in that one. They're still a playoff team, just not a division winner. As Week 16, 17, and 18, it was 16 home against the Commanders, 18 away against the Patriots, and they're going to win both of those games. Week 17, they're at the Cleveland Browns. Last year, we remember, Joe Flacco led like a 17-point comeback in the last couple minutes of this game in Week 2 of last season. The Browns should come into this game with an edge and a chip on their shoulder to win this game, and I do think it'll be a very competitive game. However, I'm going to give the edge to the Jets because that's a game that the Browns should win, and if the Browns should win a game, that means they're going to lose it. So the Jets overall finish at 11-6. The biggest question for the Jets for the last couple of years is trying to figure out who that quarterback is to take this team over the top. Well, this offseason, they, of course, made a splash, and as I've mentioned, Aaron Rodgers is now a New York Jet. This is maybe a top 10 most complete team in the NFL, and we know competitive windows are not always big. So with Aaron Rodgers only playing 2 years for this team needs to win now, and they need to win at a high level. So their pressure's on here in New York. But now they have the quarterback. They are 4-2 in primetime games. They're 4-2 in their division. They make the playoffs. The hype is around this Jets team, and Aaron Rodgers returns to MVP form. I don't think he wins it, but he returns to MVP form, as it's going to be a big year in the Big Apple. But this is kind of random. I'm starting to think about this now. When I say New York football, who do you think of? Do you think of the Jets or the Giants? As I think now it's kind of easy to say the Jets, as they have a lot more a buzz around them with Aaron Rodgers in town. But with just overall spectrum of football, if I say to you, yeah, the football team in New York, who's the first thing that comes to mind? I think the Jets or the Giants. To me, I think it's hard to say, but I probably would go with the Giants off first thought, as just because they have more Super Bowls. They've beat Tom Brady, maybe this game's greatest player, at the highest stage twice. And I think it's got to be the Giants, just with the Giants' decorated history. But who knows? Maybe if you're an old head, maybe with Joe Namath winning the 3rd Super Bowl, you might favor the Jets. I think it all just depends on what side of town you're on. But I'm going to go with the Giants for as far as who I think of for New York football. But moving over to the NFC side of things, we're going to go to the NFC East with the reigning, defending NFC East champions, but of course also the NFC champions in general. They were one penalty away from winning last year's Super Bowl, one pass interference call away on Juju Smith to winning that Super Bowl last year. Jalen Hurts was no doubt the best player in that game. Last year he was maybe robbed of MVP, some would argue, over there against Patrick Mahomes. But this team this year, they come back and they're maybe better than ever, as they lost some pieces in free agency. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They lost T.J. Edwards, which was a pivotal part in that linebacker group. And they also lost a guy like Javon Hargrave up front there on that defensive line. But what did they do this offseason? They said, okay, that's fine. We're going to go out there and get maybe the most talented player in the draft class at like pick 10 in Jalen Carter, a guy who, if he wasn't having the troubles off the field with his car accident incident, he might have gone first overall. And that might sound crazy as a defensive tackle, but Jalen Carter is that special. And then you pair him with Philly. Philly might already have the best defensive line in football, maybe up there with Washington, as I think Washington might have the edge. But they might have the best defensive line in football, and then they add maybe the most talented defensive lineman in the class in Jalen Carter. But this team, they pick off right where they left off, at least not in the Super Bowl at least, but they pick right where they left off. They win 9 straight games to open up this season as their toughest test. I mean, they have games against Minnesota, they have games against the Jets in Week 6 on the road, and then Dallas in Week 9 and Miami. So this team has competent teams they play in the first half of this year, but there's no reason to believe this team doesn't have an extra chip on their shoulder this year to get right back where they left off and to win this time. And I think to do that, you're going to have to be dominant yet again. And I think with the most complete roster in football, with a top 5 level MVP quarterback at the helm, they start this year 9-0. Moving over to the second half of the schedule, of course, at the bye week, Week 10, they are 9-0. So coming out of the bye week, their ego is high. You know, maybe they're like, we're on top of the world. We're going to run through the NFL just like last year. They run into Kansas City. A little Super Bowl rematch here in Week 11 in Arrowhead. I do have them losing that game. I do have them losing to the Chiefs, as I don't believe we're going to see a Super Bowl rematch this year. However, this is kind of our rematch here in Week 11, and I'm going to give the edge to the best player in football in Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead. Give me the Chiefs there. So Philly, first loss on the year. They're still only 9-1. Such a terrible record. But then Week 12, they get back on track. They are hosting the Buffalo Bills, and they beat the Buffalo Bills. As I'm just looking at the schedule here. But from weeks 11 through 15, another death wish for an NFL team, as the Eagles play Kansas City, Buffalo, San Fran, at Dallas, and at Seattle. That is a brutal 5-week stretch, especially in the second half of the year. But Philly, if there's a team to win all 5, it would be the Philadelphia Eagles. But they beat Buffalo in Week 2. Week 13, they host the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch of the NFC title game of last year. And of course, some would argue if San Fran had a quarterback, they would have won that game. I think San Fran will get their revenge here, whether if it's Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy. I think they win this game on the road in Philadelphia. Week 14, they split the season series, as Dallas always seems to have Philly's number. Let's not forget Micah Parsons is maybe a top 10 player in the league, leading that defensive unit. He might be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. And if that is the case, Philadelphia is going to drop this one to Dallas as they split their season series. So after starting 9-0, this team is 1-3 in a span of 4 weeks after their bye week. But then they get back on track. They go into the 12th man, into Seattle, and pick up a win there. And then they win against the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants yet again. So in a 9-1, after that Kansas City game, then they were 10-1. So 10-1 at one point in the season. Amazing record, on top of the world. But then they finished the year 4-2, which is ironically a bad stretch for this Eagles team with how their season has gone in my predictions. Kind of crazy when you have the talent that they do. Then 4-2 in a 6-week stretch is considered bad. But 14-3 record, this is going to be the new song and dance for Philly, at least for the next couple of years, while their offensive line is, before they all retire, as their offensive line is, of course, a little bit older. But when you have the most complete roster in football with a top 5 quarterback leading the charge, you're gonna be in a pretty good spot to win this many games pretty much each and every year. But this Eagles team is, to me, not only going to break the NFC East streak of not having a repeat champion since 2005, but I think they also repeat as NFC champions. As I've mentioned, they go back to the Super Bowl for the second year in a row there in Philadelphia. Moving over to the Giants, we kind of talked about them earlier. Again, who do you think of when I say New York football is the question. But they just paid Daniel Jones about $40 million a year. They're going to be looking for an increased play from him this year. At least you would hope so. But Brian Daboll, second-year coach, there's going to be a lot more continuity in this offense. They figured out the Saquon situation. They traded for a guy like Darren Waller. Of course, this defense should be a top 10 level. So this team is back and better than ever. How do they play, though? Week 1, home against Dallas, primetime game. I have them losing that one, but quickly bouncing back at Arizona with a win there, as whether if it's Colt McCoy or Clayton Tune, the Giants are going to win that game pretty marginally. Week 3, they go to San Fran in primetime. I do think they lose that one. So 2-1 or 1-2 record, excuse me. And then they host the Seattle Seahawks as I think Thursday night. Bro, week 3 they go to San Fran, Thursday night game, and they lose that one. No shocker there. San Fran is a really, really good football team if you didn't know. Week 4, Monday night football game. So they have a long break from Thursday to Monday, and then they play the Seattle Seahawks, who should be a very competent team this year. I think they lose that one as well. And boom, you're 1-3 after 4 weeks in the year, and you're trying to get back to the playoffs. You need a big win. And week 5, you go to Miami. That might be the spot to do it, but you lose that one as well. So you're 1-4 after paying maybe a mediocre quarterback $40+ million a year. It doesn't look the greatest as of right now. But then week 6 comes. That's the Brian Daboll revenge game against the Bills. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, I think the Giants are going to win that game on the road in Buffalo, getting a huge win to kind of turn their season back in the right direction and give this fan base some hope going forward. As week 7, they continue their run. They win that game. I think week 9, we're skipping a week here, but week 9 at Las Vegas, they win that one as well. But week 8, Battle of New York, I do think that they do fall in that one, maybe short. Maybe by a couple points, I'll say that there to Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, as the Jets just have too much talent on the defensive side of the ball that even if the Giants have a little bit of a coaching edge, I think the talent of New York is just, of the Jets is too much for the Giants, But maybe that game will change my opinion on who I think of more in New York. Regardless, week 10, second half of the schedule, they go to Dallas and they win against Dallas. Then they continue on that momentum from the week 9 win against Vegas. They win against Dallas. Then they go to Washington. They beat Washington. And then week 12, another kind of a mentee versus mentor game with Brian Daboll and Bill Belichick. They win that one as well. As week 13 is here. That is their bye week. And this team is 7-5. Very, very good team. A team that kind of turned their year around after that win against the Buffalo Bills. Week 14 comes around, and trust me, a primetime game against the Green Bay Packers. I wanted to pick the Jordan Love game a lot, as in my predictions, week 13 of the year, Jordan Love beats the Kansas City Chiefs. Week 14, I wanted to have them continue that momentum, but I don't. I have the Giants winning that game, and the Giants are 8-5. Really good spot to not win their division at this point, as the Chiefs have run away with it, but be a very good playoff team. But this is where they get themselves in trouble. As week 15, they go to New Orleans. They lose that one. Week 16 at Philadelphia, they lose that one. As they're now, after being 8-5, they are now 8-7. And, they're in a very tough spot, at least at this point. But then they win against the Rams week 17. The Rams at that point should be playing Stetson Bennett. And then week 18, they lose to the Philadelphia Eagles. However, I'm going to put an asterisk next to that game, as if Philly is resting their starters and New York is trying to make a playoff spot, or they still can make a playoff spot, I think I would give that edge to the Giants in week 18. So there's an asterisk next to this record. But 9-8 record, technically taking a step back from last year, as they were 9-7-1 instead of 9-8. But that is, again, of course, I don't have ties in these predictions. It's going to be a big year under Brian Daboll in year 2, as he's the reigning coach of the year. But there's still tons of questions to answer with this club, as Saquon is going to be looking to get paid this year. Will they pay him, as the running backs are year in year are getting more? They're not getting paid. They're getting more disrespected year after year. They just paid Daniel Jones. Will we see him take a step up? That's going to be the biggest question for them this year. But they also traded for Darren Waller. Can he play more than a half of football? That is going to be a question. Can they find an alpha receiver? As they have 32 wide receivers on the roster, can they find the number one guy? Their defense should be solid like last year, but can they maintain that? As in this division, anything can happen. Big year in the Big Apple for the Giants, but I have them on the brink of the playoffs, as you'll see next week. But 9-8 record, you have a pretty good shot to make it. The Washington Commanders, we can fly through this one. They're kind of like the Patriots, as Eric Bieniemy is the new head coach, I guess co-head coach. He's, of course, the offensive coordinator, but as they hired him from the Chiefs, I think he's the co-head coach now next to Ron Rivera. regardless, week 1, they open up the year at home against the Kyler Murray-less Arizona Cardinals. I think the Commanders win that one. However, the Cardinals, that would be a game they win after losing DeAndre Hopkins, a new head coaching regime, and no Kyler Murray. That would be the game that they win. But I do have the Commanders winning that game, as when you have a defensive line of Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young, and there's another guy I can't think of right now, but they have maybe the best defensive line in the NFL. I think, honestly, no questions about it. But Daron Payne. Daron Payne was the guy I was thinking of. Of course, I forgot because he is out of Alabama. But on the left side of your screen, you see not a lot of green here, as I have them winning week 1 against Arizona and week 6 against Atlanta in Atlanta to, I guess, stuff the run against a run-first team, as that defensive line will get them a win there in Atlanta. But aside from that, weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, I have them losing all of those games. And it doesn't get any prettier, as week 10, if Sam Howell is still starting at this point, one, that's a miracle. But if he's still starting, it's only going to get worse. As week 10, they go to Seattle to play against the 12th man. They lose that one. And in weeks 11, 12, and 13, I have them losing as well. So this team, after being, 2-5 at one point, is now 2-11. So two really bad losing streaks, and it still doesn't get any better than that. I think week 15, you go to LA to play the Rams. This might be the last week we see Matt Stafford and company. That's a loss. Week 16, they go to New York to play the Jets. They lose that one. Week 17, it's San Fran. I don't care if Trey Lance actually can play football as the number 3 overall pick. It doesn't matter who's starting. If it's Christian McCaffrey at quarterback, they're going to lose that one. And then week 18, if Dallas is resting their starters, and if Dallas is locked into a playoff spot, I think Washington can pick up their 3rd and final win on the year, ending this horrific losing streak, as it might be a shock to hear me say that, this type of year in Washington, but it also might be a shock if you heard me say it might be a crucial year in Washington, as I'm not talking about the annual name change, as that's always a recurring theme with them to change their name, but I think it's a big year for their coaches and for some of their players as well, as if this is the end result, if they finish at a 3-14 record, I wouldn't be shocked by a number of things. First off, Ron Rivera, he would most likely be out as the head coach. Eric Bieniemy, after some would say being blackballed from a head coaching spot, would finally get his shot at the head coaching position. Chase Young, a former number 2 overall pick, had a very promising rookie year, but since that point has battled injuries, and he hasn't been on the field. Would they look to trade him, as he's been in trade discussions? Terry McLaurin is another guy on the offensive side of the ball. He's a very underrated receiver, can help a lot of teams out. He started to voice his frustrations with the team and how they haven't been winning at a high level. Does he eventually want out if a 3-14 record is his fate, as a team like Buffalo would gladly take a guy like Terry McLaurin? But if this team, if they do start Sam Howell, is he going to be ready to win at a high level for multiple games? I just don't think he is yet. So again, that's another question. If they go out there with a 3-14 record, and let's say they draft Caleb Williams out of USC, what does that do with, what's the future of Sam Howell? Do you trade him? Do you cut him? Do you try and develop him like a guy like Zach Wilson and just keep him as a formidable backup? There's going to be a lot of questions for this team this year and for this future offseason. But with a 1-5 divisional record, a 3-14 overall record, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I think at that point, nobody is safe. I'll say that. Nobody's safe in Washington. And that's why I think it's a big year, as some of their stars might be on the move sooner than we all think. But closing off this video with the Dallas Cowboys, of course, America's team, as if you don't think they're America's team, you don't know football, or of course, you just aren't in the media. But week 1, they are going to the Giants in prime time. I think it's a Sunday night game. Regardless, they win that one on the road. As week 2 against the New York Jets, I think they're going to sweep the New York trip, as they win that one against the Giants and the Jets to open up the year. Week 3, they host the Arizona Cardinals. They go to the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think it matters because Arizona's not good on the road, at home, on their couch. or on the schedule, of course. Dallas is going to win that one. Week 4, they're going to host the New England Patriots. I think this is a game where they could lose, as Bill Belichick, defensive mastermind, could he find something out to bother this Dak Prescott-led team? Very, very possible. But I do think they're going to win that one as well. So 4-0 start for America's team. And then week 5 at San Francisco in prime time. This is where we figure out what type of team the Dallas Cowboys are. And surprisingly, I think they win this game against the San Francisco 49ers, as they are now 5-0 to start the year. In typical Dallas fashion, they look like a great regular season team. Week 6 at Los Angeles against the Chargers in prime time. I do think they lose that one. Regardless, week 7 comes by. That's their bye week, and they're 5-1. If you're 5-1 in the division with the Eagles, who at this point are 7-0 or 6-0, you're still in a really good spot to compete for this division. Week 8, you open up home against the Rams, and this might be the first time we see Stetson Bennett over Matt Stafford, but I don't want to disrespect Matt Stafford, as he's a very, very good quarterback. But they do win that one. So at this point in the season, Dallas is 6-1. Going into Philly in week 9 to take on the, at this point, 8-0 Philadelphia Eagles. It's going to be a primetime game. It's going to get flexed to that point. This is going to be that yearly Dallas Eagles primetime game that everybody is glued to watch. But I do think they lose that one. I do think Philly gets the upper hand in that one. And going into week 10, right, going into the second half of the year, they are sitting at a 6-2 record. They need to pick up some more momentum, as Philly at this point is 9-0. So if they want to win the division, they have to get moving. Week 10, they go back to play the New York Giants, but the Giants get their revenge. So after the hangover from the 6-1 start, they suffer 2 straight losses to 2 divisional opponents, as they're going to get beat up in that Philly game, and it's going to just roll over to this Giants game where the Giants take advantage. But after a long break from that Giants game, they do have a 4-week stretch where I think they get back on track, as they play Carolina, Washington, Seattle in primetime, and Philly in primetime. I think they win all 4 of those games, as every single year, I know, how do they beat Philly? But Dallas and Philly have split for like the last 6 years. So, of course, I'm going to follow history and say that they do that yet again. Week 15 at Buffalo. This is a game where I think they could win, and I think this would be a big game for them if they won. However, this is a loss here, and I think this game would solidify. They no longer have a shot for their division, as week 16, they do win against Miami. Week 17, they beat Detroit. And week 18 comes around. At this point, there's no need to play your starters. You're locked in at the number 5 spot in the NFC. Sit your starters. They lose this game to the Washington Commanders. However, of course, if their starters play, they win this one. So an asterisk next to that one. But still, 12-5 finish. And there's not going to be a big spiel for me on this Dallas Cowboys team, as they have talent on both sides of the ball. They have some superstars and a guy like CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. They have solid coaches, but Dallas, it's Dallas. You know they're going to be a good regular season team. As come postseason time, I think they only have like 3 postseason wins since the 90s, since their last Super Bowl win. So the Browns have 1. I'll put it that way. So you're really only 2 wins away from one of the worst franchises in the league since your last Super Bowl, which is the Cleveland Browns. This Dallas team, it amazes me how much talent they have year in and year out, and how much money they pour out just to not win at the highest level. Regardless, this team is going to be a team that is good enough to get there, but that's about it. They're not going to be able to win many playoff games, if any. But maybe, just maybe, if this is the end result and they lose another first round playoff game, maybe Dan Quinn returns as the head coach, and he's the new head coach of this Dallas Cowboys team. As we all know, Dan Quinn was the head coach of that Super Bowl attending Atlanta Falcons team. But 4-2 in their division, 4-1 in primetime. Again, it's Dallas. They're good enough to get there, but they're not good enough to get over the hump. That is going to do it for our NFC East predictions. Just to recap here on the AFC East side of things, I have Miami winning the division at 12-5. The Jets going 11-6. The Buffalo Bills going 10-7. And the Patriots going 5-12. maybe it's Bill Belichick's last year. In the NFC East, we have Philly winning the division at 14-3 for back-to-back years. Dallas rounding out at 12-5. Also, I think was their record last year. The Giants at 9-8 are third in the division, on the brink of the playoffs. We'll have to see if they make it next week, or Thursday, excuse me. And in the last spot in the NFC East, just like last year and maybe the year prior, it's going to be the Washington Commanders at 3-14, as they have a lot of questions to answer about this team's future, and it all starts with their quarterback in Sam Howell. But that's going to do it for today's video. Before we get out of here, again, quick shout out to Life by Laura, as she's the first sponsor on the channel. Couldn't be more grateful to work with her. Again, on Facebook, Life by Laura, just exactly how it sounds, with 2 spaces in between. And, of course, on Instagram as well, Life by Laura 2023, all one word. Go follow her there to see her past projects, future projects, and maybe discuss with her some things that she hasn't done yet, as she can probably get it done for you, is a good way to put it. But again, that's going to do it for today's show. We're going to be back tomorrow with some tips and tricks for fantasy football this year as far as drafting goes. So, of course, the biggest part of your fantasy year is the draft. And why not? I'm going to throw you guys out some tips and tricks on how to dominate your league going into this next season. But I will see you guys tomorrow for that video, and of course Thursday for the AFC and NFC West. And I'm also going to have in Thursday's video just a recap of how all these standings sit as far as my predictions. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy. We'll see you guys tomorrow for some fantasy football. We're out.